So yeah, according to this seer, we will be forever kissless. We'll also have awful luck in battle, and because we did something quote-unquote atrocious to a rich friend of ours, we'll be forever poor. You get who this is yet? Coincidentally, the seer has just the thing to turn around our fortunes. A big old book that he makes sure we know is a tome. A tome. The seer gives us the book out of the goodness of his heart and tells us to always keep it with us. But you know what? Inventory space is limited in this game, so fuck that. Here, Chuck, take this shit. Our next stop is the dwarf camp in the mines. We go talk to the blacksmith we've met before, and our next stop is back to Lord Lake, where we totally didn't forget to find a new chest now that there's water here. It contains an iron hammer. Hey, you know who could use an iron hammer? That dwarf blacksmith who said he needed a new hammer back in episode, I don't know, 7 or some shit. We show our hammer to him, and he likes it.
Oh, and he's the height.
We give him our hammer, and now he'll upgrade our character's weapons all the way to level 10. This is a big damage buff, so we get our mainstays, us and Leon, up to 10, and a few other characters we brought along who can make the most out of it. When we're done, the blacksmith lets us know that he wishes he could work on weapons more often, as his master only lets him work on, like, windows and shit. We ask him if he'd rather come work for us, since we're gonna be using weapons a lot and everything, but we hear his master call for him by name, Dongo. Dongo wanted a hammer. Dongo goes to his master, who yells at him for working on weapons and not nails. Dongo returns and tells us he can't come work for us right now. We're not done in the dwarf camp, because we can talk to this dwarf woman who's basically fucking hidden behind this fat asshole. We ask her what she's doing, and she says she's digging air holes. I don't know if the science of digging holes in the ground to make breathing easier holds up, but sure, we'll go with it. She says her name's Zunda, and you know what? We could use some air holes, so we ask her to join us. She actually considers it, saying it's become dull just digging holes for air. She's heard tale of humankind's mythic winders and wonders what it would be like to see one. So she follows us around until we show her a window. The catch here is she doesn't just want to see any old window, but a window specifically carved into the earth, like what a dwarf would do, you know. This is kind of an annoying side quest to step into blind, since when a character other than Leon follows you, it locks you out of certain other side quests and the main quest until they stop. It's not impossible to figure this one out on your own though, since we do know a place with windows carved into the earth. Lunas, the conclave built into a mountain, is our destination. Making sure to bring along Takamu to show us the path, we head to the Elven Passage. The enemies here have gotten much stronger. It can be a great place to farm experience, but you have to have a decent party to do it or you'll get mollywopped. We don't have one right now, so we just run away until we get to Erda, who leads us to Lunas. The window in question is in this first room in the conclave. Zerda is awestruck by the window's design and gets a sudden spark of inspiration to design her own. She decides to join us and leaves, stating that she don't need no stinking elf guidance when she can just dig her way past the forest. Zunda, if our almost complete lack of actual reason to ask her to join our army wasn't any indication, is not all that important of a character to the overall story or progress through the game. She is, however, a window maker, which in a very meta way allows her to change the appearance of the game's menu. And that's it. I'll be switching around windows just to mix things up once in a while, but yeah, unfortunately that's all we got out of Zunda. At least we can use those window sets we've been getting now. Our next stop is Hod and its, music. We go to the appraisal shop in Bastan, the art appraiser that hates the modern art that surrounds him. While we were in the revolving bridge, we got a lot of unapprised paintings from the enemies there. We need to take these to Bastan and have him look at them and hope one catches his eye. Wait. You're not supposed to let him actually appraise them. Okay, so we need more paintings, which means more bridge killing. What you have to do with these paintings is pretty unintuitive, even if you know you need one to recruit Bastan. You don't have him actually appraise the paintings. Instead, every time you talk to him, there's a random chance that one of the paintings in your inventory will be the one you need. And this changes every time you talk to him, so you don't actually need to get more paintings unless you have him appraise them on accident. You just need to keep talking to him with a couple question mark paintings in your inventory, and eventually one will magically be the correct one. Baston exclaims that the painting is an Ivanov painting, a reference to a character from Suikoden 1. Baston is ecstatic to see such a work of art after being surrounded by Hod. He immediately renounces his position here and asks to join the Friend Army. So we take him and his funny little mustache on. Baston is an appraiser, and that's all he is. He can join your entourage as a support character, but all that does is let you appraise items on the go, which isn't all that useful in ability. Still, having an appraiser at your headquarters saves you some travel time, so he's good to have for that at least. Not much else to say about him, really. Again, he has a funny little mustache. Little wispy thing. By the way, when we went back to Chuck to get our paintings for Baston out of storage, Chuck remarked that the tome we weren't supposed to give him started glowing and giving off some rancid vibes. I don't know what the fuck happened to the footage of this, but nothing cool happened. He just gives us the book back. So it's back to Yashuna once again and off to the Tricolor Inn, where we're gonna give this book back to the seer because he ain't say it was gonna glow. I ain't about no glowing books. It's hard enough to read as is. We go to his room where one of the inn workers is tidying up. The seer is an inn right now, so we leave the book with the innkeeper to give back to him. Alright, I'm sure nothing more will happen there, so why don't we swing by Estrees? Heading to the inn here, we see a woman in a Chinese dress who looks different than every other NPC, so she must be important. The woman, whose name is Linfa, remarks how fancy and handsome we are, mentioning that we must be loaded and suggests we play a game. We agree and she calls us a sucker, but it was in parentheses so we can't hear that. The game she wants to play is Blind Man's Bluff, which you might already know the rules of. Essentially, both players get a card and you bet who has the highest number. The gimmick here is that you can only see your opponent's card, thus Blind Man's Bluff. Here it plays basically the same as in real life with some Suikoden flair to it. Instead of normal suits, ties are settled on what rune is displayed on the card. Also, while betting, you're able to use Linfa cards to increase the pot. You play with tokens, and whoever is left with all the tokens at the end wins whatever money you bet. While playing, you see a full model of your opponent, Linfa in this case, and are supposed to use their facial expressions to try and guess the number of your card. We don't do too well. Losing, we give Linfa 2,000 pots as agreed, and she immediately turns around and gives it to a mysterious man, saying her bets are paid, and then leaves. The man calls us a sucker for falling for her trick. Didn't guess? You can't win this game of Blind Man's Bluff, likely because Linfa cheated. Well, shit. Oh hey, it's Alhazred, the old guy who... Tomes! Yeah, dude, I've seen a suspicious tome. Fuck yeah, dude. We tell Alhazred about the glowing tome given to us by the seer. He immediately recognizes it as the Book of Condemnation, a tome that condemns its owner to a violent death. He immediately joins our party and tells us to take him to the book. So it's back to Yashuna and the Tricolor Inn where... Oh god, it's sucking his dick. The book is sucking his dick. Oh god, he's gonna come. We gotta stop this. We gotta stop him before he comes. Quick, Alhazred, free this man from the dick-sucking book of evil. Oh god, it's so big now. It's gonna suck all our dicks. Oh no. The Book of Condemnation can be a bit of a dangerous fight, but it ends up fairly easy because of its weak defenses and low health. I mean, it's just a book after all, dick-sucking book or no. It attacks by casting a few spells, some of them AoE, so if you don't have the damage, you need to bring some healing along. Thankfully, we do have the damage, and we're able to beat it without much trouble. Except Cius, but Cius kinda sucks ass. With the Book of Condemnation defeated, Alhazred is able to contain its true form. The seer awakens from his nightmare of having his dick sucked. His cowl comes off, revealing Urim Barrows. Dun dun dun. He tries to act like he's pulled the wool over our eyes, but dude, you just had your dick sucked by a book. That makes you fucking gay. So yeah, Urim found the book in his father's library and thought he'd sneak it into our possession to get back at us. He then runs off, falling down on his way out. Alhazred is rather confused by the whole affair, but thanks us for bringing him to the tome. We ask him to join us, and he does so. Alhazred, as you could probably guess, is a mage, and a pretty good one at that. Unfortunately, we just got two of the best mages in the game in Vicky and Xerace, but the more the merrier, I guess. Compared to those two, Alhazred just lacks the power to keep up, and being short range doesn't exactly help him either. What makes him worth using, though, is his versatility. His magic skills are great, with an SS and incantation making him very fast, eventually anyway. He has at least a B in every affinity that matters for him, and has 3 free rune slots, starting with 2. You can make him a healer, a buffer, a debuffer, focus on one element type, or spread them out. You could do really anything with Alhazred except make use of his short-range weapon, which is a fucking book. I don't know why he bothers hitting people with a book, but he does. Alhazred will also be acting as our army's librarian of sorts. All those old books we've been finding now have a purpose, as we can bring them to Alhazred to store and read them. Old books are fairly peripheral, as they simply provide lore and tips about the game. Still, these can be pretty interesting. There's no time to go over the ones we've collected so far, but maybe once we get the rest, we can go over the interesting parts. Well, that side quest's done, but the recruitment is not. I suppose I should clarify that when I'm doing these long sequences of side quests, not all of them have to be completed at that time. Many quests and characters are missable if you move too far ahead in the story, but for this playthrough I'm simply getting characters as soon as they're available, or at least as soon as they're available to my knowledge. Our next stop is the Beaver Lodge, where all the beaver boys and girls are no longer afeared of us. We stop to talk to this beaver who mentions boss. Just boss. He lives upstream, and apparently the Elder's father met him once. Believe it or not, this is our hook for another side quest, so to Elder Fabaglabagloo we go! Bawoogie Googie starts by expressing his relief that Lord Lake has recovered so quickly. He asks us what we're here for, and, we asked everyone else to join us, so why not? The Elder says that should the beavers join with any human cause, it would be ours, but after seeing the devastation their fortress has caused, he thinks it's best the beavers stay out of the war. Next, we ask him about Boss. Fuwala's father talked about him a lot, apparently, but since he was so old, Fuwala just thought his father was going senile. And that's it. That's all he tells us. I believe we have to have this dialogue to trigger the side quest, so yeah, this kind of stuff is why I recommend using a guide when playing this game, even for the first time. We have to travel south along the river from the Beaver Lodge. We come near this group of rocks, and the top left lets us know that it's actually a location we can enter called the Waterfall Basin. This foggy dungeon is kind of long for a side quest, but not too difficult to traverse. The enemies within are just below our level, so they aren't that dangerous, though a lot of them can poison us, which can be annoying. There is some treasure here, the first being some pale moon beads. These, this is a bath item. Bath items are, I'll get into it later, just know that there are bath items, and this is one. In a very hidden chest further on, we find voice set 4. We can't use voice sets yet, but like Windows sets, this lets us personalize our game somewhat, in this case, changing the voice of the main character in battle. Finally, in a similarly hidden chest, we find a Stone of Luck, a usable item that permanently raises a character's luck stat by about 5 or so. Okay, now we're about to get to the area where Boss resides, but I've hidden something from you. Well, saved you from having to watch something more like. You might have noticed we've kept Alhazred in our party, and that's because I had to grind him up to the level of the prince. In order to meet this boss, he has to be at or just below the level of the main character. Again, this is why I always recommend using a walkthrough to recruit characters in Suikoden games, because nowhere is this requirement mentioned. With the strong enemies on the path to Lunas giving a lot of experience, it wasn't too bad, but some guidance here would have been nice. Anyway, we come to a proper basin under a waterfall where Alhazred spots an interesting boulder. It's quickly revealed to not be a boulder, but instead a big-ass turtle. It swims up to us and greets us, because it also talks. And looks like this. And is a tortoise, sorry. The tortoise tells us that his name is Gino, though some call him Boss. Okay? He says he's approached us because he sensed the presence of someone who's lived a long while. That being Alhazred, because he's a fucking old man. Gino doesn't like them dang millennials and prefers to talk to older folks. He asks Alhazred if he'd like to talk for a bit. Alhazred, excited by this creature he's never read about, agrees. Gino says the chat should only take about 10 years or so, which, Alhazred might not even have left, so that's a no-go. We ask Gino to join us instead, so he can talk to all the old people we've got with us. And he does, because we get a big fucking giant tortoise out of nowhere joins us for war, okay? Believe it or not, Gino can actually be used in normal battles. As is customary for big non-human characters like this in Suikoden games, he actually takes up 2 character slots when he's used. So the question is he good enough to replace 2 characters? Not really. He's really more like 1.5 characters. Average characters, not powerhouses like Zerace or Belkut. Still, he's actually pretty usable if you need what he gives. What he gives is a big-ass tank. He doesn't have a weapon, can't wear armor, and can't use runes besides the one he comes fixed with. He's also the slowest character in the game, so he's not going to be your go-to for using items. Basically, he scales terribly, but for much of the game, he's going to be a fat wall soaking up hits for the rest of the team. The parent turtle rune he has lets him give your whole team a big resistance boost to most status effects, making him very useful in certain fights. So overall, not the greatest, but an interesting option. We're not done in the basin, which is unfortunate because we're teleported out of it after recruiting Gino. Making our way all the way back to where we met the tortoise, we spy a familiar face. It's the pretty boy that Mueller said should kill himself for losing the Sacred Games. He's happy to see us and explains that before his match in the games, a girl gave him some sweets. He ate them and, yeah, he was drugged like Belkut by Gazelle. He introduces himself as Richard, the Lindworm mercenary. We ask him to join us and his compatriots. He says that after his embarrassment in the games, Mueller said he needed to toughen up by training under a waterfall or something. And that's why he's here, to train under the waterfall. This won't do, so we head back to our headquarters and talk to the Lindworm Brigade. Mueller calls him a dumbass for actually going to train under a waterfall and tells us to get him back here. So that means we have to go back to the waterfall basin and through the dungeon again to get back to Richard. We let him know that he can come back and he asks to join up with us. He's very happy to do so. Richard is a little airheaded. Thankfully, Richard is also a fucking baller fighter. One of the best, some may argue the best frontline fighters in the game, actually. He's very similar to Belkut, where he hits hard, he hits a lot, and he's hard to hit. In fact, he's really hard to hit. He parries or dodges basically constantly, even more than Belkut. This makes up for one of his few downsides, his poor health and defense. His other downside, and what may put someone like Belkut ahead of him, is he only has 1 rune slot, limiting his options for the more broken combinations in the game. Still, another upside is he'll crit constantly, so it's up to you which is better. But yeah, believe it or not, this little airheaded side character is one of the strongest in the game. Okay. Hey, do you want to actually progress in the game? Because I do. Let's do that. After being rejected by the Bavars, I suppose we should go to the war room and ask Lucretia about our next move. Our little council here meets to discuss. George has returned from his visit to Sable and tells us that Armes has largely withdrawn from the area. But Barrow's betrayal has made the leader of Sable, Lord Ralbell, understandably paranoid, and he's chosen to keep all of his forces at home. Lucretia is heavily dismayed by this and tells George he should have tried to negotiate. George rebukes this by reminding her that he's a wanted man. Yeah, not so smart now, huh, Lucretia? Boz volunteers to go to Sable instead, as he's apparently old friends with Lord Ralbell. There's not much else to do, so we talk to Zunda real quick and get a fresh new look for our menus. Heading outside the castle, we notice a ruckus over by the bridge. A Naamsashipsis is being interrogated by the guards. We ask what's going on and the man rushes us. The guards just let him go because they're bad guards, I guess. He starts asking us a lot of questions really quickly about our castle and the war. Then he hits on Leone and asks if she watches us take a shit. Finally, the man calms down and introduces himself as Taylor, a newspaper reporter. He's here to get information, but he also was asked to bring a message from the city of Lelkar. We bring Taylor to the war room to hear this message. A man by the name of Wasil sent Taylor to ask us for help. Talgel knows the name Wasil, who apparently has a lot of influence in Lelkar. He verifies the message is from Wasil, as Lord Rovere was friends with him. Leone brings up that the ruler of Lelkar, Lord De Beers, is a Godwin puppet. Raja chimes in, explaining that Lelkar has a diverse political populace. Many are loyal to Lord De Beers and Godwin, and many are staunchly opposed to them. Leone wonders why we're being asked to protect Lelkar, and Taylor tells us that he's heard that Lord De Beers has fled the area fearing our military. He's a scaredy boy. Lucretia asks us what we want to do, and we've been doing nothing but side quests for about 5 hours now, so yeah, let's go somewhere new. Kyle enters the war room, having heard us talking about Lelkar. Turns out he's originally from the area. Lucretia dresses us up incognito again, including Kyle, who will be coming with us. Talgel is worried Kyle will be recognized, but Kyle assures them that no one there would believe he actually became a Queen's Knight. So it's off to Lord Lake. Yeah, there's one other person we have to talk to before heading off. With another major battle comes another opportunity to talk to Don Knotts. Don is ecstatic that we've helped Lord Lake. We ask him once more to join with us. He starts off by saying that our actions have clearly shown our morals and that he can no longer remain neutral in the war. But, like the little tease he is, Don says that since we have Dr. Sylvia with us, we don't need him, and he'll take up her duties here for the time being. But we do need you, Don. More than you could ever know. With that, finally, we get ready and talk to Log in order to sail to Lelkar. When we arrive, we talk with Leone and Kyle about remaining inconspicuous. Then someone immediately yells at us, calling us Prince Gavi. This is Wasil, the man who sent us the message, and he's really intent on calling us Royal Highness. Kyle tells him to shut the fuck up because he's blowing our cover, and Wasil immediately recognizes him and mentions him becoming a Queen's Knight. Kyle finally tells him we're supposed to be disguised, and Wasil tries really badly to cover up his mistake. So off to a good start. Wasil asks us to follow him to his house to the south. Right away, we spy a chest that contains a white rose brooch, one of the better accessories at this point as it gives you a nice boost to speed. A little further on, we find a Guardian Kosk, a decent headpiece. As we head south, we see an argument between men on a bridge. One side appears to be staunch Godwin supporters, while the other defends our point of view, even calling into question the official story on the coup. Like we learned earlier, Lelkar is in fact a city divided, not just by politics, but by the river. The city is composed of 3 islets, the one we're on right now being the central one. Here, everyone we talk to is very supportive of us, but from this conversation we can gather the western islet is very much the opposite, where they support Godwin. We arrive at Wasil's place where he apologizes for being bad at keeping secrets. Kyle asks him how he recognized us, and he explains Lord Rovere, who he spent a lot of time with, had portraits of the royal family. That's kinda weird. He goes on to explain the situation in Lelkar. Though officially Godwin territory, many do not support them. As I said before, the central islet is staunchly against Godwin rule, and the eastern, though less fervent in their opposition, hold no love for them. The western, however, remains loyal. He explains that basically the only thing that held the islets together was their disdain for the ruler Lord De Beers. With him fleeing, the situation has worsened. Suddenly, one of Wasil's servants enters and tells us that one of Orok's hunters were spotted in the eastern islet. Wasil tells us that these hunters forcibly draft people into serving the Godwin military and urges us to make our way to the eastern islet. That's not where we go, though, because we don't play by the rules. We head to the western islet, where again, the people here make it clear we wouldn't be welcome should they know who we were. We stop by the armor shop, where we talk to its proprietor. A man named Mo Sin tells us this shop is an officially Godwin-sponsored shop. He asks us which side we support in the war, but really he just wants to fawn over the Godwins and how much money he makes off them. So we, of course, proceed to spend around 100,000 potch in his store. Look, he has a special portrait, alright? You know what this is probably for. On the northern end of the western islet, past these fucking birds, is a chest containing a rage piece. On our way to the eastern islet, we go to the south of the central. Hidden under our tree is a chest containing the Try tactic. This is a unique tactic in that it can only be used with 3 party members. Just in case you only wanted to use 3 party members, it gives you a few buffs when you do so. When we enter the eastern islet, we see a commotion in the plaza. A woman is hysteric, calling for her son. Other townsfolk begin decrying other young men and boys who have gone missing, blaming this Auroch. Leon asks who Auroch is, and Wasil explains he's the leader of the western islet. Auroch claims to be working for the Godwins and forcibly drafts soldiers. A loud, brusque man enters the plaza, who the crowd calls Volga. Volga claims that he'll go to Auroch and find the missing boys alone. A townsman claims this would be suicide, but Volga won't hear it. Kyle stops Volga, and we learn that Volga is actually the leader of the Eastern Islet and took care of Kyle when he was a kid. Kyle reminds Volga that he used to say that the people of Lelkar shouldn't fight amongst themselves and offers for us to go in his stead. Volga refuses at first, but eventually relents. Kyle then calls us the prince because no one is good at playing spies here, so it's off to the Western Islet to find the kidnapped townsfolk. Before we leave, however, we stop by the inn and find a chest containing basic combat. Like the basic magic we found earlier, this is a very important item despite its arbitrary location, as it'll let us rank up combat skills to B level. We head to the Western Islet where Kyle leads us to Auroch's residence. He tells the guards we're volunteers for the Godwin army. They're hesitant to take us since we're a pretty little boy and Leon's a girl, but they're fine with it as long as they meet their quota. When we get inside, an irritable man immediately recognizes Kyle. Apparently, Kyle stole this guy's girlfriend in the past. Good going, Kyle. Anyway, they attack us. Like the other fights against thugs in the past, this isn't all that difficult of a fight, though we do have a few casualties because I didn't bother to level up Kyle or Kisara. Still, with some AoE spells and a couple of crits, we make quick enough work of the Cuck Squad. After taking them out, the group remarks about how naughty of a boy Kyle was in the past, and we head further in, picking up a Raging Lying epic skill on the way. It's important to open this chest here because I believe you cannot come back here afterwards. We go down to the basement where we find a bunch of people passed out on the ground. A man follows down after us, explaining that the men are drugged for easier transport. This is Auroch, and he's kind of an asshole if you haven't guessed yet. Auroch explains that he's working with the Godwins mostly just because he sees them as the winners in the war, and even tempts us to work with him, offering to make it worth our while. We refuse, and he calls us losers. That's not nice. He then calls up the stairs for someone, and Nikea, the woman who tried to enter the sacred games, comes down. Kyle shows himself to be a man of good tastes. Turns out she is working as a mercenary and was hired by Auroch, even though she clearly dislikes him. What follows is another 6-man thug fight, but one made a bit harder due to the presence of Nikea. The same strategy applies, however, of just nuking them with AoE spells. Nikea is much more resilient, however, and will typically survive the initial onslaught. She's actually pretty hard to hit with physical attacks and counters often, so magic is definitely still the way to go. Overall, not a difficult fight if you have at least one decent mage in your party. The thugs defeated, Auroch scolds Nikea, who apparently told him she could win the sacred games. Bringing this up reminds Nikea of who we are, and she laments having hit us since we're royalty and all. This has the effect of letting Auroch know who we are as well, though his reaction is odd. He immediately becomes very nervous and tells us to take the drugged men and not to tell anyone we did so. Then he quickly leaves. The party is fairly dumbfounded, but quickly gets to work on helping the kidnapped people. We can't carry them back on our own, so we head out to find help. We then get to see where Auroch went after learning who we were. We see a ship headed by the traitorous Queen's Knight Zahak, who's being informed of Auroch's presence. Zahak asks Auroch what happened to the latest shipment of recruits. Auroch claims he won't offer any excuses, he just hit a snag and wasn't able to make it this time. Zahak says he actually wanted to hear Auroch's excuse and says he heard that the prince, us, had entered the city. Auroch is at first indignant that Zahak is having someone spy on him, but eventually comes clean. Zahak then issues an order to inform all his ships and forces to attack and occupy Lelkar. Auroch complains that Zahak is backing out of their deal and storms off. Back at Wasil's place, Wasil and Volga thank us for our help in freeing the young men. We're then informed of a visitor who turns out to be Lele, who has a message from our scouts about Zahak's advance. Volga immediately blames Auroch, but Wasil seems to have other ideas. We state our intent to defend Lelkar, and Lele informs us that about half of Rafleet's forces are on their way. Another Godwin fleet appears to be on the move around Sol Falena, so Lucretia has chosen to remain at headquarters with the other half, leaving Lele to act as our tactician. The battle for Lelkar is probably the first major battle where our unit composition really matters, at least if we want to get a victory plus. It's also the first major battle that takes place on both the land and river, with 4 of our units being naval units. This battle is all about defending, so we make sure to have a lot of abilities that allow us to push back the enemy without suffering losses of our own. We start by setting up our defenses on land, blocking the way into the city with our infantry. It'll take a while for the ground forces to reach us, so we shift focus to our naval units. The play here is to have Zerace leading a ship so she can use her star rune. This is much like the Dawn rune, but deals a little more damage and doesn't heal our units. We move our ships into position, and when most of the enemy units are in range, we blast them with the rune to scatter them. After that, it's fairly easy just to send our ram and combat ship to pick off their respective targets. The land battle is a bit harder. Because the bridges we're mostly fighting on are so narrow, a lot of the time when a unit retreats, it'll just run back into the unit that scared it off. This can be useful if you have an overpowering advantage, but here we do not. Zahak's forces outnumber us by quite a bit, and though we have a level advantage in a war of attrition, we're going to lose people. It doesn't actually matter if the enemy forces reach the city, we just have to eliminate every enemy unit. I opted for rune archers instead of regular archers because the Mother Earth rune that Talgil and Alhazred come with are very powerful for nuking weaker units. With careful positioning of our unit types, eventually we're able to wear down the enemy forces without losses, though it did take me about 3 times to do this because of the awkward unit pathing in enclosed areas like this. With the advancing forces defeated, we can begin to make our own advance. Zahak senses this and orders his men to destroy the bridge to the central island. Lele orders our forces to surround them, forcing them onto the western island. Zahak's response is to just burn shit. He orders his army to set fire to the city. This stops our retaliation as we pull forces back to help evacuate the citizens, and Zahak destroys the central bridge. Wasil and Volga meet up with us as we go into the burning city to help out how we can. On the way, however, we're waylaid by Godwin's soldiers who just want to fight us. Another thug battle, we do the customary magic clusterfuck and make short work of them. Though note, we don't get a chance to save in between finishing the major battle and this fight. Our party is healed, but still, if you fail it somehow, back to before the major battle you go. The party wonders how we're going to put out the fires if the Godwins are just going to attack us. We hit in a little bit and we see Auroch speaking with some of his men. He's telling them to focus on evacuating the people, the young and old taking priority. He himself is escorting an old man through the smoke. He approaches us and asks for help, which we give readily. After the fires have died down, we survey the destruction. Lele in particular feels as if she failed in her duties. Volga confronts Auroch, who feels himself to be a failure as well. Wasil, though, thanks Auroch for acting as a buffer between Lelkar and the Godwins. He explains that had Orok not acted as liaison, the Godwin's plundering of Lelhar and its people would have been much worse. I mean, he did still kidnap and drug people to force them into fighting a war, but at least he admits this, so it's not a complete whitewash of his deeds. Orok then pleads with us to give Lelhar our protection, offering his services and resources to our cause, while Sil does the same for himself and Volga. Volga disagrees, but only to Wasil speaking on his behalf. He's still with us, he's just an ornery asshole. And with that, we've won yet another territory to our side.